Mac is back, or is he? Does Kirk even know, or maybe he does know? We shall see, and we will discuss, of course. Hawkeyes Live right here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you being here for the best in discussion, debate, and analysis. Corey Braddock is here, of course. He makes this show roll for us. Join Corey on from the Hawkeye of the Storm on a daily basis for Hawkeye football, men's and women's basketball included. Corey, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. Yeah, more like Strat is back, right?
Yeah.
The Jackson Strat, or Jack is back. That might be the better one, right? Jack is back.
There's a few to go with there. Well done.
Yeah, so I listened to Kirk today. I wasn't there in person, but I kind of got that feel. Now, he's never going to say that the season is lost, but I do feel like he's a little more relaxed now with the quarterback situation, because I think he realizes that it's just human nature, regardless of who Kirk Ferentz is. I think he realizes that their goals are in large part lost. And obviously, he's going to say that the focus is Maryland. But yeah, I mean, we don't really know who's going to play quarterback. It's kind of good to hear that Marco Lainez is back. And frankly, and this is nothing against Cade McNamara, but when the news broke, Matt Zenitz of CBS Sports and 247 Sports yesterday tweeted out that Brendan Sullivan would be out for the season. I was told by a source yesterday, after that news broke, that the official word was 4 to 6 weeks. And then Kirk kind of made fun of that tweet from Zenitz today during his press conference. He's like, well, there's only 2 weeks left. So, out for the season, what does that mean? So, he's not out for the bowl game necessarily. Kirk kind of cast some shadow of a doubt on that. I know what I was told from a source is that Brendan, at least as of last week, was hopeful that he could be back for Nebraska. I think it's very unlikely based on everything, not just what Kirk said, the reports out there, but 4 to 6 weeks was the initial estimation on that ankle. As Kirk mentioned today, nothing broken there. Cade McNamara is cleared, but Kirk brought up, we don't know how the kid's going to play. And if he's rattled, if he's not 100%, then I just don't know. I want the kid to have a good finish to his career, and we thought maybe we'd seen the last of him already. But at this point, there's nothing to play for other than bowl positioning and pride and some individual awards. So, I mean, I know I sound like I did a month ago when I was vying for Brendan Sullivan, but to an even greater extent now, I'd like to see Jackson Stratton. But let's add to that, I'd like to see Marco Lainez in real action. Because is Jackson Stratton the future? I mean, probably not. Could Marco Lainez be the future? Maybe. I know there's a lot of people out there that believe that Marco's just going to dip into the portal. And I have not spoken with Marco's camp about that. I know some people are, I'm sure, doing that actively, trying to figure out what these kids are going to do. I think in general, it's good to wait till the end of the season before you start asking those types of sources, those types of questions. The kid's coming off a thumb injury. I was surprised that Kirk said he was good to go this week. Last I had heard, it was a broken thumb. Now, I don't know if that was left or right thumb. So obviously that makes a difference. He's a right-handed quarterback, and he's also a guy who likes to run and become a running back. But the good news is it sounds like they got some depth this week. But I hope the best for Cade. I hope he's healthy, but I don't want to see him play. I have no interest in seeing him play, Mark. None. I have no interest in seeing Iowa gash Maryland, beat him by 40. I don't care. That doesn't make a difference to me. I know that sounds cruel and harsh, but it doesn't do anything for me. It does nothing for me. Would I like to see them win? Yes. I don't want to see them lose, but it doesn't do anything in the grand scheme of things. What could do something in the grand scheme of things is to see another quarterback who might be on the roster next year get his feet under him and give some energy and some hopefulness to this fan base to a point where you're not totally reliant on the transfer portal in the offseason to give you a glimmer of hope at quarterback. I think there is a glimmer of hope at quarterback with the return of Sullivan next year, assuming he sticks around. But let's see something from, hey, if it's Jackson Stratton, fine. If it's Marco Lainez, fine. But playing Cade McNamara does nothing for me right now. It might do something for some people out there who want to see the guy end his career on a good note. But based on what I've been told, he made plenty of money to come here and ride the bench. So I don't really feel bad for the guy. Like, he's been hurt. I feel bad from an injury, from a health standpoint. That's unfortunate. And certainly if he's got a concussion and he's at risk of re-injury, he shouldn't be playing anyways. But I'm ready to see the next guy and the guy after that and the guy after that. If they were in contention for a Big Ten championship, no. I just want them to play the best guy, whether that's Cade or whether it's Marco or someone else. But they're not. So let's see who's young and ready to go. Let's see the upside and the potential, the ceiling. And, against a Maryland defense, it's probably not a bad defense to go up against for a young quarterback.
Agreed on all points. Now, when Kirk, for those of you who did not see or hear today's news conference, if I recall, and correct me, Corey, if I'm wrong, I just watched it. It seemed as though somebody had started down the path of the quarterback situation with the assumption that since Cade McNamara was cleared, that he would be the starter. And Kirk had to correct them to basically say, it's not quite that simple. And that even though the recently released depth chart does have McNamara number one, Kirk said that if they played today, that Jackson Stratton would be the starter. And so my initial read on that was, okay, is he telling us that he's expecting McNamara to beat him out later this week, that technically speaking, McNamara has not practiced enough yet to reclaim the job, but he's fully expecting him to do so. But then the more he talked about it, the more I thought maybe he's going along the lines that you just outlined, that he's thinking, hey, we need to ready these quarterbacks and see what we've got, especially since he certainly complimented what Jackson Stratton accomplished against UCLA. And it's not a situation where it's like, okay, well, we can either play Cade McNamara and that's a dead end because of the experience and the eligibility running out versus this guy that we know nothing about what he's going to do when the bullets fire. No, he showed us something against UCLA. Why not try to build on that and give him the extended time to see if he can show us even more?
I would like to see them use both Stratton and Linez and use this game as sort of an audition for both of those guys and use next week as an audition for both of those guys. Like, those are the guys who are healthy. If Cade's not 100%, then it's even more reason to go down that road. Now, that's not necessarily historically a Kirk thing to do, to audition quarterbacks. In fact, it goes very much against the grain of what Kirk Ferentz has inherently stands for. Now, maybe here's a couple possibilities here. Perhaps Kirk said what he said today regarding Cade not being the presumed starter at this point, as a sort of kind of in spite of what was reported on Monday. Because you get the feeling Kirk hates that kind of thing. And he kind of made that clear today when a national reporter comes in and swipes a story like that, breaks it on Monday, one day prior to his press conference. Kirk acknowledged he wrote up the depth chart Sunday. The report then came out Monday. So either things have really changed and, Cade kind of went backwards Monday from a health/football standpoint, or Kirk's kind of wanting to give it back at that reporter who broke that a day before his press conference. It was even before the depth chart release yesterday. So I think there's a possibility there. And the other possibility, I think, is maybe Kirk has learned from, the first guy that comes to my mind, and this is maybe a bad example because he's done nothing since he's left Iowa, but I remember the Carson May thing a couple of years ago when Iowa was going into the bowl game with Joe Labus and Carson May didn't get any run in the bowl game. I thought that was dumb, right? It's another bowl game that means nothing nationally. Obviously, Iowa takes pride in bowl games, and not saying you shouldn't, but at least play the kid, give him a chance. And I know there's been talk, well, Carson already had one foot into the portal at that point. Okay, who cares? Play the kid and let him see what he can do. If he goes somewhere else, fine. Wish him luck. But maybe he really takes off and you can convince him to stay. But that's not historically been the attitude. So maybe Kirk's learned from that, or maybe Tim Lester, maybe he'll have a real impact. Like he gives Kirk his advice, like, Kirk, I really think we need to focus in on Jackson and or Marco and maybe he's kind of agreeable to that notion, and so maybe that has an impact on Kirk. But at the same time, Mark, what may end up happening, as Kirk acknowledges, is Friday comes and they feel good with Cade, and he plays the whole game, plays the rest of the season, and we never see Stratton or Linez the rest of the way. Linez hops in the portal at the end of the year. Stratton may or may not return as a walk-on who wants to be a scholarship and as a former FBS scholarship player. That's possible as well. So we'll just have to wait and see. I just hope for the fan base, for my own interest level, and for the future of the offense, the pass offense, that we get to see someone other than Cade McNamara on Saturday.
For the future of the offense, yes. And now, if this was playing out in a different era, just 3 or 4 years ago, then you would think that the lean would be even more heavily toward playing the younger guys to prepare them for next season. And because they would be the guys battling for the job along with Brendan Sullivan coming back. But with the transfer portal, Iowa could be banking on an addition there. And of course, we'll have an entire offseason to deal with that. But the portal does open. Is it immediately after the season's over? I don't remember the adjusted portal window. I know that it's been reduced from 30 to 15 days, but we'll have to look into that. Yeah.
I was going to say real quick. Yeah, you're right. It's opens for business on December 9th. And I mentioned that yesterday. It's less than a month now. So basically after championship week, right after championship week, and the portal window opens and it's down to 20 days. So players, not that they took a long time to hop in the portal as it was, but they're going to get in there a little faster this time around. And there's already players obviously that have announced. You got the kid from, is it BC that's in there? I don't know how you pronounce his last name, but he'd be a guy that obviously there's going to be teams after him given what he did there. But, the good news is it should be an interesting offseason with Lester. I think there's going to be a level of aggression that we haven't seen offensively. I mean, what kind of aggression did Brian Ferentz take to the portal at skill position spots? I mean, what kind of level of aggression could he have taken? And let's not forget, they added Sullivan after Lester was hired. But, I mean, Cade was added when Brian Ferentz was still there. And there was a period of time where we talked about this, Mark. Iowa hadn't hired an offensive coordinator yet. And so that makes it difficult to be attractive to a potential skill position player, not just because of the history of that offense, but you don't know where it's going to go. We don't even know what it's going to look like. So now, at least, assuming they retain Tim Lester, they can hit hard at quarterback, and they'll hit at other key positions as well. And then some of that's dependent on who stays and who leaves. So it's going to be a very interesting offseason, maybe more interesting of an offseason than we've seen during this era of portal NIL stuff at Iowa. I mean, they've had interesting ads. Obviously, the Cade thing blew up, but a lot of teams they're knee deep in the portal every year, and this may be the first year we see Iowa knee deep.
Yeah, we're going to have a fast and furious end to the season, both on the field and off the field, with National Signing Day moved up 2 weeks to Wednesday, December 4th. It's usually been, even this early signing day that just started 6 or 7 years ago, been in mid-December, but it's moved up 2 weeks to December 4th. Championship games that weekend, college football playoff selections going out on Sunday, and then the portal opens on Monday. Yeah, bowl invitations going out, the whole deal. It's and then of course that Sunday following the last regular season, Saturday, opens up a floodgates of coaching firings that create the domino effect of then hirings to fill those spots and guys leaving other jobs. That just creates this groundswell of movement all over the country. Fascinating.
Hey, I think what's fascinating, here's a Big Ten connection guy that landed at least an interim job. I didn't realize that Tim Brewster was on that Charlotte staff. So that's kind of interesting. He's taken over for what's his face that wears the muscle shirts, big guy. I can't remember his name, but so Brewster's got a chance at, he's coached at Minnesota. If people don't remember his tenure there, he's known as a tight ends guy. He's filling in. There's a number of open positions. It's amazing, not counting some really solid FCS programs like UNI, Northern Iowa. Mark Farley announced he's retiring, and he's one of the longest tenured FCS coaches. And obviously, they've had a lot of success both in that conference and nationally.
Regardless, with all the more important activity to come off the field, there is a game to be played on Saturday in College Park, Maryland, against a 4-6 Maryland team that's been quite disappointing themselves, playing an Iowa team that is trying to avoid a 6-6 finish. But as Corey has outlined, regardless of the last two games, this has been one major disappointment for the Hawkeyes this year. But the two get together in the Big Ten Network at 11 Central. We've got Colin McNamara stopping by from Testudo Times on SB Nation to help us break it down. Colin, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Doing great. Thanks for stopping by to break down the Terps for us. Of course, the last time the Hawkeyes headed out there to College Park, they had a good time, 51-14. And that was on a Friday night. And here we are again. You may have heard my intro into this game that Maryland, obviously, with 3 consecutive bowl wins. Mike Locksley being asked that question every offseason when there were divisions about trying to reach Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, and that was the hurdle. And now it's a completely different dynamic, but a major step backwards this year. So just one win in the conference. So your thoughts about where this program sits that had been on a slight ascension and now appears to have hit some adversity.
Yeah, just to kind of back things up. Locksley took over in 2019 when the program was probably at the depths it's ever been, rock bottom for them. And he's continued to build. I've been, kind of a Locksley defender over the past few years, just where he's been able to get this program back to. And, the 3 straight bowl wins, obviously coming with quarterback Tua Tagovailoa, the brother of Tua Tagovailoa, the quarterback for the Dolphins. And, now the all-time passing leader in the Big Ten. He's gone this year, which has led to Billy Edwards Jr. now stepping up. And through the first few games, he looked far from the problem. But now I think since October 11th, he has more interceptions than touchdowns. The team's just crumbling. Every season beforehand, Locksley talks about competing for Big Ten championships. And like you mentioned, this is just a massive step back. And I think it's also important to note that the one Big Ten win that they do have pretty much came off the hand of a blocked field goal. If USC hits that field goal with about 40 seconds left, I believe was in the game, or it was under 2 minutes. USC goes on to win that, and Maryland is winless in Big Ten play with only 3 wins coming against non-conference opponents who just simply aren't up to the stature of Maryland's program. So even that one bowl or that one conference win, it's you can kind of draw that up to luck. So this has just been an extremely disappointing season. And, now coming off the Rutgers loss, they've beaten Rutgers by 26 points on average over the last 3 years. They come and, get manhandled by Rutgers last weekend. So this is just kind of an all-time low for the program as far as last, 3 years go. And, there's just not a lot of confidence, energy, excitement around the program right now.
And now comes the time where Mark pauses and wants me to take over.
We'll trade off. I've got a few other questions for Colin.
Well, Colin, this is no disrespect to you at all. As I led out here, first of all, I'm guessing you're of no kin to Cade McNamara. We've got to get that out of the way because people will resent you for the rest of your time with SB Nation if you admit that. So even if you are, don't admit it. But I want to make something very clear. I thought it was interesting today. He brought up Michael Locksley and kind of being a defender of Michael Locksley. And I will admit, Michael Locksley's tenure at Maryland, Mark, I think you and I have had discussions about that. I think it's been more successful than some people anticipated it would be, given what his head coaching record was prior to Maryland. Now, I will say this is interesting, and Colin, I don't expect you to comment on this, but Mark, you listened to Kirk Ferentz's press conference today, and we all know the Brian Ferentz storylines. That's one thing we haven't brought up. He's obviously an analyst in the staff now, so there's that storyline. Now, he's talking about sidelines on Saturday, so I think that storyline's going to be a little bit overhyped. But what I think is interesting is whenever Kirk is asked about Michael Locksley and he talks about how much respect he has for Michael Locksley, that's such maybe we shouldn't be talking about this, but it's such a deviation from the norm, given some of the scandalous things that Michael Locksley was involved with at New Mexico. Now, the only thing I can piece together and Mark, you help me on this. The only thing I can piece together is that some of the scandalous stuff at Michael Locksley involved his son at New Mexico. So maybe there's the connection there. They've both been embattled with bloodline type of scandals, but he was accused of punching an assistant coach. He had a sexual assault scandal and lawsuit at one point. I was surprised, but at the same time, he has given Brian a job. So there's that. I don't know. Just a random thought that I wanted to bring up. I guess the big thing for you, Colin, that I'm curious about, Mark brought up, what was it? I'm losing track of years. 3 years ago, the trip out to College Park on a Friday night, and a couple of undefeated teams. That was early in the season, and Iowa eventually ascended up into the top 5 before plummeting out. And that game, it was a Friday night on Fox, and obviously Maryland played horribly, turned the ball over 7 times, but there was so much excitement around the game. And yet I remember looking at the crowd that night and being like, why are there not more excited fans? It felt like a bad crowd given the circumstances, because it was a really good start for that year for Maryland. So what kind of fan base is going to be there this weekend for a team that's on life support for bowl eligibility?
Yeah, it's been a constant talking point among Maryland fans. Even, head coach Mike Locksley, talks about in his presser pretty much every week, kind of pleading the fans to come out. And I actually asked him today in his media availability is, Maryland men's basketball played Marquette on Friday, number 15 Marquette, and the environment was just great. It was so refreshing covering football all season to go to a basketball game where the fans are on their feet cheering for every defensive stop, every single point. There was a loud eruption from the crowd. And I asked him, I was like, what's it going to take to get that kind of environment and energy into the shell, which is, what we call Siku Stadium. And he's just, typical kind of PR answer, like, oh, I've loved, the fan base here so far this year. I think they've really stuck through us through a difficult season. But, that's just, I'm expecting probably as bad as the crowd has been all year, maybe over the last 3 years. The fan base, I really don't know what it is. Maybe it's because there's a lot to do in the Maryland, D.C. area that kind of distracts people away from the football program. And, given just kind of the history of the football program, not necessarily known for being a national powerhouse, obviously by any means, it doesn't really naturally spark excitement. There's not really much of a culture, I think, within the fan base. And even the fans that do come, the student section is usually pretty packed, at the start of the game. But then by halftime, whether they're winning or losing, the students usually leave to go to the bars, do whatever. That's just the trend of what happens here. If you look back at last year, they started 5-0 for the first time since 2001. They beat Indiana, who obviously Indiana's a great team now. Very different team last year. But they started 5-0. They beat Indiana 44-17. I believe they were up through the entire game. Fans still left at halftime. Fans are leaving. When they beat USC, this is a big game for the program this year. The fans stormed the field, but it was like a couple thousand maybe stormed the field. It was like the most uninspiring field storming you've probably ever seen in your entire life. It's just kind of been the constant thread. And on our podcast, the Testudo Talk podcast, I kind of went on a little bit of a rant about this after the Rutgers game, just kind of calling out the fans, because it doesn't matter really what position this program is in, who they bring in, what the talent they have there. They've had Stephon Diggs, they've had DJ Moore, they've had all these high level people. They have Talia Tagovailoa, the Big Ten's all-time leading passer, and the fans still don't show up. So, to get back to your question on what the environment's going to be like, probably the worst it's been all year. It's usually an embarrassment whenever we had a national television game and they pan to the crowd and it's like 50% of the stadium's empty. They have the upper bowl on the opposing sideline that's always empty. It's as a student that goes here, it's just sad to watch. Honestly, I'm very, very disappointed in the fan base year in and year out, and it's the same this year, and it's probably going to be the worst it's been against Iowa.
Now, I will say this is a quarterback storyline that's somewhat intriguing, because you have a first-year starter in Billy Edwards. You have a situation at Iowa where we don't even know who the starter is going to be. It could be any of 3 guys. Heck, by Saturday, it may be Mark. We don't know. And so I think that's obviously fascinating. But tell people what can they expect from Billy Edwards, because the numbers say he's been pretty good in spite of their struggles. And I would think both of these teams that Iowa plays here down the stretch, Maryland and Nebraska, there's got to be a sense of urgency. If there's not a sense of urgency, then I think Michael Locksley's lost his guys. And is Mark led with, hey, they've won 3 straight bowl games. I wouldn't think, it doesn't seem like, it seems like just from my recollection, without studying each year, during Michael Locksley's tenure at Maryland, they have this roller coaster where they start hot in September, then they dip way down, and then they kind of recover at least enough to make a bowl game, and then they perform pretty well in December. So are we going to see that again? Because they're going to have to win these last 2 games, which means going to be a sense of urgency this weekend.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of the big shtick is like the September Terps is always a thing where they go undefeated in September and then, things kind of fizzle off from there. But yeah, I mean, Locksley was saying there's no pressure. Obviously, that's what the coach is going to say. 1-game seasons, whatever. But yeah, they have to win these next 2 games for bowl eligibility. Iowa's a big task at hand as it is, but then they go and play number 4 Penn State on the road the following weekend. So, yeah, I guess there has to be a sense of urgency. But something that I've noticed that's weird and maybe a little bit frustrating as a fan is on the sidelines when they're getting blown out by Minnesota, by Northwestern, you see the players kind of laughing and joking around the sidelines, which I've seen fans kind of point out in our comment sections, and I've even seen on TV myself. It's definitely frustrating for Maryland fans. I don't know specifically if Locksley's lost the locker room. I know the players love Locksley. He's been a fairly good recruiter since he's been here. But yeah, but to get back to your original point on what to expect from Billy Edwards, this is, he was the backup to Talia the last 2 years. He's waited his turn. And he was a guy he scored 7 rushing touchdowns last year. He led the team just based on like the tush push. Obviously that was kind of sweeping the nation with the Philadelphia Eagles, and Billy Edwards being kind of a bigger stature guy was used. And this year they haven't really used him that much in the running game, which I know fans have been frustrated, but Locksley, as most coaches do, want to protect, his quarterback. But he's been on a steady decline. I predicted early in the season that our backup quarterback, MJ Morris, would actually come in for him. I thought, just based on what we've seen through the bowl game last year and just the rare starts that Billy would get over the last 2 years, he just isn't an accurate quarterback. And, through the first half of the year, he was pretty fine. He was actually a bright spot for this team. But over the last few games, he's shown that his inaccuracy has been a big issue. He's missed Ty Felton in the first quarter against Rutgers on a wide open post route that would have been a touchdown. He missed Caden Prather on another touchdown later in the third quarter, I believe. This is a guy who, started hot and has just fizzled out. And that kind of leads to the conversation that has been going on around the program with Malik Washington coming in, who's the number 5 ranked quarterback in the country by 247 Sports. He's going to come in next year as a true freshman. And, who will start Edwards or, Washington is kind of up for debate. But, Billy Edwards is somebody that, again, the numbers look good, but they're also inflated because Maryland has been losing a lot of these games. They're forced to pass. Last week against Rutgers, he had 330 yards. I believe 180 of them came in the fourth quarter when they're losing by 2 scores. Maryland was outpassed the first 3 quarters, but then in the fourth quarter, they end up, outpassing them by 150 yards, and all of a sudden it looks better on paper. So the stats may look good, but Billy Edwards has not been very good over the last few games.
What's concerning to me as well, when I look at this from a defensive standpoint, is you got Maryland statistically as the worst pass defense in the conference for a team that you just brought up gets behind early. So one would think teams don't have to pass it very much.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's that. And then obviously they're the 3rd worst total defense in the conference. And like you said, they pass the ball a lot. They're forced to pass a lot. Now, Billy Edwards' completion percentage, when I checked it earlier, is still sitting like 65% for the season. Now, I don't know, again, how much of that is teams kind of let them dink and dunk and take what's in front of them. And, they've built a lead early. But Mark, do you have anything specific that I'm not hitting on?
Well, basically, yeah, this is an odd program to nail down because they've been in the Big Ten now going back to 2014. As Colin outlined, Mike Locksley did a better job than I anticipated. I would not have hired him, but he proved me wrong, at least in the interim. 3 consecutive bowl wins, not ever being able to break through. I actually asked him at Big Ten Media Days, that with all the position players, the skill position players, Colin, that you mentioned, Raheem Jarrett in recent years and so forth and so on, the guys that they've had, when are they going to develop the kind of play along the offensive and defensive fronts that are going to challenge? And Locksley, of course, gave the pat answer that he thought that this year's team had what it took to do that. So my thought here is that I know it's only one bad season, but depending on what the expectations are, not from us necessarily, but the administration, at what point does he, and again, I don't expect it to be this season, but does this set up Mike Locksley for a hot seat season in 2025?
Yeah, this has definitely been a conversation going on throughout at least the media and the fan base. A lot of, maybe overreacting fans want him fired, but at the end of the day, he's going to stay at least another year, guaranteed, because we have Malik Washington coming in, which is obviously probably the biggest recruit Maryland has had under Locksley. Getting the fifth ranked quarterback in the nation is obviously a huge deal for this program. So he's not going to be fired this year, absolutely not. And just based on history, Maryland had Dwayne Haskins coming in to the program. They had him committed to Maryland, but then they fired their head coach and he flips to Ohio State. They're not going to risk another situation like that. And Locksley has kind of proved over the last 3 years that he at least deserves another shot. But yeah, absolutely, the hot seat is on. If he has another season like this last year or next year, another 3, 4, or 5 win season where he's not making another bowl game, I absolutely believe that kind of the hot seat will be on. But also you have to keep a perspective where Maryland isn't these teams where Iowa is getting 8 to 10 wins. That's kind of the expectation every year, or Penn State or Ohio State or Michigan. These teams that kind of expect this. Maryland hasn't been a historically great football program, so I think fans maybe need to temper their expectations a little bit on how far the means of this program can go, as far as especially with NIL funding being such a huge issue. Locksley can only do so much with what he has, and I think he's done a relatively good job to at least have 2 more years left, as the head coach of Maryland.
Colin McNamara here from Testudo Times, everyone. And of course, while the football season's only probably 2 games left for this Maryland football team, staring at an underdog situation against Iowa and then more so against Penn State, of course, lock it in for the basketball season that has started up. So again, Colin McNamara with Testudo Times.
And Colin, is women's basketball as big as football?
Oof. People love women's basketball here. It is not, but women's basketball, it's probably the only consistently big program that Maryland has. And they're off to a great start this year. So people are excited about women's basketball. People are always excited about women's basketball.
Because it's never the men's program hasn't fully recovered from the previous regime. Is that fair?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think Willard showed some signs in his first year, but last year was obviously a big hit, and this year, we'll just kind of have to see what they do this year.
Big Ten's loaded in the women's game, Mark.
Okay.
Big Ten. Let me repeat it.
Big
Ten is loaded in the women's game, Mark. And the 3 of the 4 West, unlike football, in which you have, every team but Oregon that's kind of been crummy to some extent this year. Oregon is a power in the women's game. USC and UCLA are both. There's like 7 or 8 teams in the top 25 as of this week, and several teams just on the outside looking in. So
every team in Big Ten football is crummy.
No, I said every team but Oregon. Okay. What I meant was the 4 teams that were added from the West Coast.
Oh, okay.
USC, UCLA, and Washington have in large part been disappointments. I mean, Washington's been fine based on what our expectations were. And frankly, UCLA's been okay. I have no room to say anything. By the way, one more note for people. Maryland is worst in the Big Ten. I shouldn't say that. Second to worst in the Big Ten in penalty yardage. Only behind UCLA. So Iowa just played them, and there'll be another penalty-ridden team this weekend on the road. So,
hey, Colin, thanks for stopping by. Appreciate it, and enjoy the game this weekend.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Colin.
All right. The look at Maryland there. First game since that was 2021, correct?
Yep, 2021. Yes. That was when Hawkeye fans were riding high before it all came crumbling down that season.
Crumbling down. But
that Purdue and Wisconsin back-to-back was rough. And then, of course, it finished with the Michigan beatdown 42-3 in the Big Ten championship game. So it kind of came crumbling down. I mean, after they beat Penn State, the following week, it was like, wow, could the dream be real? Nope. Nope. It ain't real. Still living in a candy land. Hey, there's a comment in the starred column over here, Mark, that you have to read. I'm not sure where this guy, I'm not sure where this came
Oh,
from, but
boy.
you have to read it on the air. Please read this.
Richard, what do you have for us? Kirk owes nothing to you, Corey. He does to the players on the team. Kirk will put on the team the best player that he and his coaches feel will give the team the best chance to win.
Aye, aye, Captain. Right. Here's one of our "In Kirk We Trust" fans. That's fine. You can be I mean, nothing's ever said that I'm a sloppy homer more than this comment. So that's fine. I had no problem with the sloppy homers, but just embrace it. Embrace that you're a sloppy homer, that Kirk can do nothing wrong, and that you'll forever support whoever's the head coach. And that's fine.
Maybe it's just Kirk. Maybe they won't support whomever is the head coach. Maybe that ends with Kirk.
Yeah. It's like somebody earlier today, I read some comment somewhere that, people, there's a faction of the fan base, and it's not like this is new, but there's a faction of the fan base that has said, it's time for Kirk to hang it up. His time has passed him by. And someone responded, say, Kirk has earned the right to hang it up when he chooses to hang it up. Okay, fine, whatever. You can say that, but that doesn't make you right. Just like what Charles Barkley said to Shaq a couple of years ago on Inside the NBA. Doesn't matter how loud, how big and loud you scream. You can say whatever you want. It does not make it right. It doesn't mean that that's fact just because you say it. It's fact. And Kirk has also made a lot of money here. I just, that type of comment does sort of annoy me, because nobody's above being criticized, and fans who are tired of what they're seeing have a right to be tired. They have every right to feel away, especially if they're paying fans in some fashion. They don't have to be massive donors, but if they pay to be at the games, and frankly, even if they pay to watch these games, these universities are getting a lot of money from these TV networks because of the fans that pay to have these types of services so they can watch the games. So I just, it's always the black and white thinking that drives me nuts. And that's not that I'm anti-Kirk, but people want to, when have I ever said that Kirk owes me something? When have I ever said that? I mean, that's just a naive statement to make, with all due respect, Dick.
Yeah. Well, we've talked on here for years and years and years at this point, and I think I'm pretty understanding of where you stand on all of this. And you're a huge, huge Iowa sports fan and want nothing more than Iowa to succeed and win championships. However, you're not going to be blinded by ignorant, misplaced faith and support. If there is something that can be improved or addressed or is in error, then you're going to address it.
Yeah. And again, I have no problem with Richard or anyone else saying that they believe that Kirk has a right to leave when he wants, and that he can do no wrong. That's what a fan is, to some extent, right? I mean, like, a fan doesn't have to be, they do not have to look at it both ways. They don't have to be unbiased. That's what makes them a fan.
Absolutely.
No problem. Yeah. You don't have to be objective. I think if you're not objective doing something like what I try to do, or even someone in the media, then I have a problem with that, because to me, you're not being true to your job and etc. So
now, if that perspective is taken by the administration, I do have issue with that, because I read this week concerning Mac Brown at North Carolina, who's 73 years old. His football program is marginal, decent, and I don't know if this was substantiated, but apparently he is going to stay as long as he wants to stay. Well, that's ridiculous. You're paid per season. You have a contract, but the contract can be broken either way. Let's face it, that's the way the world works. And whether it's Kirk Ferentz or Mac Brown, that particular coach is being paid per season to produce. Now, obviously, you build up equity, meaning that just because you go 6-6 one year, you just don't get thrown to the street, because you've obviously achieved to that point. And so everyone's going to have a down season. Most coaches are going to have down seasons here and there. However, this whole business that just because you coach for a long time, if Kirk wants to coach until he's 80 and he's going 2-10 every year, he can just do that. That's fine. No.
That's not
No.
fine.
You're paid and evaluated for what you're doing right now, not what
Yeah.
happened in 2002 or 2009 or 2015.
And there's talk that Mark Farley, I know you're not in touch with FCS football, and obviously I live in Iowa, so I have a different perspective on it, but I've heard from some decent sources that there's speculation out there, legitimate speculation, that Mark Farley is not leaving on his own accord. I know he's made statements about the nature of football and how it's changed and whatnot. He was one of the longer tenured coaches in the country in the FCS, and they haven't won a conference game this year. And so, does that correlate? Is he leaving on his own accord? Maybe, but yeah, nobody's above that, and especially not now, not with this era of football.
We do appreciate everyone being here at the Voice of College Football. Corey and I get together every Tuesday, so make it a appointment with us each and every Tuesday at 4:30 Central, and you catch Corey every day at the Voice of the Voice of College Football. We're tearing you away from your platform, Corey. We're going to bring you on over here. I'm going to kidnap you. No, Corey's at From the Hawkeye of the Storm each and every day with not just football, but of course, men's and women's basketball. So what's the calendar look like this week?
No men's basketball postgame tonight. They do play. They'll be on BTN. Plus, they play Ryder. And Mark, I'll send you a $10 Venmo right now if you can tell me what Ryder's mascot is. And maybe because you saw my tweet earlier today.
I did not see your tweet, and I did cover college basketball quite extensively for a long time. Now, I didn't cover Ryder, so the Ryder Barons.
No, they're the Bronx. The
Okay.
Bronx.
I don't remember that. I don't even know where Ryder is located.
No idea. And frankly, I don't care. There's another thing I don't care about. So, but no postgame tonight. I have some other obligations. So we'll be back for women's postgame Wednesday. I'll be there covering the game up in Sioux Falls. So that should be interesting. The Pentagon is a cool college basketball venue from what I've been told. And then the men are back down in action against a good Utah State team down in Kansas City this coming Friday. So men's basketball tonight, and post game for the women tomorrow, post game for the men Friday. And then we have, it doesn't stop. Obviously, we'll have post game coverage following the Maryland game Saturday, and then a belated part 2 of the post game show for Iowa, Maryland, which I'm so looking forward to a double post game this weekend. But Coach Patterson he's calling a Missouri Valley game this Saturday. So he'll be tied up there. So we'll have post-game coverage on Saturday after the football game and then Sunday night. So should be a busy weekend. Will be a busy weekend.
Linda, thank you so much for reminding everyone to hit the like button. It's a very easy thing to do. Doesn't cost you a penny. Just helps the algorithm here. Does not massage my ego in any such way. It's all about the algorithm here on YouTube. So please do that. Subscribe to the channel as well. And of course, join Corey for women's basketball post-game coverage tomorrow night. And then, of course, post-game with over the weekend after the Maryland game from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Corey, good to see you, and enjoy the basketball and the football this week.
Thanks, Mark.